I'm Susan Mitchell. I'm 52 years old. I have long, wavy chestnut hair. My green eyes are tired from the years, but still vibrant. My skin is smooth as porcelain, but full of the marks of time. When I was young, I was a woman who attracted attention. But over the years, the responsibilities of being a mother and then a wife took me away from being myself. I have been faithful all my life. I sacrificed everything for my husband and children. I made our house a home. I put my own dreams aside for Rick's career. For 30 years, I was the perfect wife, or so I thought. But one day, my life was shattered by a text message. When I saw that message on Rick's phone, something inside me snapped. I can't wait for tonight. Your wife will never know, but what was that? Will was standing in the doorway staring at me. He looked tired, but there was something else in his eyes. I hesitantly motioned for him to come in, and he went in without speaking. A moment of silence. Will looked around with his eyes. He tripped over the wine bottle, but he didn't say anything. I didn't know what to do. I turned to him, tried to mumble a few words, but nothing came out. Finally, I could only say one sentence, stifling the silent screams inside me. "Rick is cheating on me, Will!" Will's whole face changed. His expression, which had already seemed to anticipate this, now turned to anger, but he was still in control. He waited a few seconds to digest what he had heard, so as not to hurt me. Then he asked in a very calm but deep voice, "How do you know that?" Something inside me broke. I collapsed on the couch. I ran my hands through my hair. My phone was still on the table. The desire to show the message was mixed with the fear of showing it, but I couldn't hide the truth anymore. I picked up the phone and turned the screen to Will. "Emily, I can't wait for tonight. Your wife will never know." Will stared at the screen for a few seconds. His face was like stone. Then he narrowed his eyes. "When did you find out?" "Last night." It felt like a knife in my chest. My hands trembled. I wanted to look away, but the words on the screen were already seared into my mind. I had been faithful to Rick for 30 years. And what about him? He was cheating on me with his 25-year-old assistant. Two things were going through me at that moment, pain and anger. But I had to ask the question, what was I going to do next? That was the moment when everything changed. Was I going to act in anger and force Rick to confront me? Would I go quietly and get out of my life? Or take revenge? What hurt me the most was that I couldn't share this with anyone. My children were grown up. I couldn't tell them. My friends? No. No one could know that my marriage was a lie. My eyes fell on the phone. It was past midnight. Thoughts were running through my head. Was Rick with Emily right now? Didn't he know I noticed this message? Or did he not care anymore? My insides were clenching. I'd been faithful all these years, and look what I'd gotten in return. But I couldn't share it with anyone. I couldn't tell anyone. My husband cheated on me. I couldn't. I stopped for a moment. Maybe I could tell someone. I picked up the phone. A number popped up on the screen. Will, my husband's brother, Will, who for years had been quiet, calm, always one step behind. Why did I need him? Why had I thought of him? As the phone vibrated in my hand, the voice inside me kept trying to stop me. "Don't do this, Susan. What you and Rick have is none of Will's business. What will change if Will finds out?" But there was another voice inside me. "But you're alone, Susan. You're about to lose your temper. You need to talk to someone about this. And Will, he won't hurt you." With that in mind, I took a deep breath and tapped the phone screen. I called Will's number. A single ringtone. 2, 3. Finally, a tired but confused voice came from across the room. "Will." "Susan?" I didn't know what to say for a moment. "Will, I'm not disturbing you, am I?" My voice was shaking. I could hear the sound of deep breathing coming from across the room. "Will, Of course not. Is everything okay? How could I answer that question? Was everything okay? My eyes fell on the bottle of wine on the table. I need to talk. Will fell silent. There was a long silence. Then his voice softened. Will, where are you? I swallowed. I'm in the Hamptons. Will's breathing grew heavy. There was a pause between sentences. Then he said what I had been waiting for. Okay, hold on. I'm coming. An hour had passed. I was walking all over the house, fighting a big battle inside myself. What would I say to him? Would he judge me, or would he really listen? The wine was gone, but my head was still drunk. Just when my inner voice was about to talk me out of it, there was a knock at the door. I froze. I stood up and walked slowly to the door. When I opened the door, there was Will. He was wearing simple jeans and a gray sweater, but just seeing him so ordinary made something inside me tremble. His eyes locked on mine. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other. And that's when I realized Will wasn't here just to listen to me. And did you say anything to him? I laughed bitterly, as if boiling water had poured over my head. No, Will, I didn't confront him because I didn't know what to say. Will took a deep breath and clenched his knees in his hands. For him to do that after all these years, he said through his teeth, I could never do that to him. You couldn't do it to him, huh? Neither could I. But he did it, looking down at his glass of wine. How old was I when I first met you? I was surprised. Where had this come from? I frowned. I don't know, 20 maybe? He shook his head from side to side. He smiled slightly, but there was something bitter in it. 18. I was 18 when my brother first brought you home. He raised his wine glass. He gave me a strange look. And the first time I saw you... We were both silent for a while. The clock was ticking, but the silence was not uncomfortable. Will pointed to the wine glass on the table. Got any more? I poured him some more, then took a glass for myself. The more wine we drank, the deeper our conversations became. At first we were just talking about Rick's betrayal, but then... At one point, Will started talking about the past. You know, Susan, he said, I admired you. I almost dropped the glass in my hand when I heard that. I felt a strange warmth inside me. What did he mean? The way he looked at me at that moment, it was different. But I was tired, sad, and I didn't want to think about it. Will, tonight, please. It's not about me, it's about Rick. Will smiled, but there was a deep sadness behind his smile. Yes, it's about Rick. And he swallowed those words. I really don't understand how he could do this to you. And he didn't take his eyes off me as he said it. And that's when the first spark lit inside me. Had he just come to listen to me? Or was there something else he was hiding from me? But tonight, I didn't want to find the answers to those questions. It was getting close to dawn. Will's eyes were tired, but he still didn't seem to want to leave me. We walked to the door. I was going to see him off, but there was a strange uneasiness inside me. Did I not want him to go? I didn't know. I opened the door and the cold night air rushed in. Will straightened his coat. He looked into my eyes one last time. Susan, he said, his voice almost a whisper. You can always count on me. I shivered inside. For a few seconds, I approached him without realizing what was happening. I just wanted to kiss him lightly on the cheek to say goodbye. But at that moment, Will leaned into me, and our lips met for a few seconds. But then we both pulled back in surprise. What had we done? We locked eyes. Inside me, something snapped, but it was a mistake, wasn't it? After that kiss on the doorstep that night, I should have pretended nothing had happened. When I woke up in the morning, the first thing I thought about was Will's lips. No! I quickly pulled myself together. It was just a moment. It was wrong. I shouldn't have seen him again. I told myself that over and over again, but Why was my heart still pounding like crazy? Rick, he still didn't know anything. Everything was normal at home, as if he hadn't cheated on me, as if he hadn't said to another woman, "I can't wait for tonight." Every night he'd come home and kiss me, smiling, as if nothing had happened, but now disgust was rising in me. Every time I looked into your eyes, I saw only betrayal, and worst of all, when I closed my eyes, I saw Will instead. I kept making excuses to myself. He just wanted to comfort me. He was just a good person. I was too sensitive and I misunderstood, but I was tired of lying. The truth is, Will made me feel like a woman for the first time, and it was creating a storm inside me. I shouldn't have called Will. But when my finger touched, I wanted to forget that night. So I tried to distract myself, but everything was coming back to him. I picked up the phone. Will's number was on the screen. "You shouldn't call," but my finger had already touched it. Stolen. My heart was about to burst. But then I got a message on the phone. "Rick, I'm busy tonight. I'll be late." And at that moment, I resigned myself to my fate. My eyes lingered on Will's name. And then I pressed dial. And I waited. "Susan?" As soon as I heard his voice, a strange warmth spread through me. It was like I was waiting for her to pick up the phone. But I quickly remembered I had to pull myself together. "Will, hi." There was silence for a moment. Then his voice became softer and more sincere. "I've been waiting for your call." My heart raced. Was he waiting? I didn't want to ask, but he continued. "Are you okay? How are you?" I took a deep breath. This question, like he wasn't just asking about that night. He really wanted to know how I was doing. And the worst part was, I didn't even know how I was. "How about you come see me?" Will's voice was on the other end of the phone, expectant and cautious. I was surprised. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head in a matter of seconds. Was it a good idea to see him? But I wanted to. As my inner turmoil grew, I realized that the only thing that could comfort me was to be with him. "Yes," I said slowly. "Let's meet." "Where?" A strange confidence built up inside me. "At my place." Will paused for a brief moment, then his voice was soft but with a deep meaning. "Okay. Uh-huh. When should I come over?" "Tonight." Hearing my own words, I felt a warmth inside me, mixed with a cold chill. Was I really doing this? But Rick wouldn't be home tonight. I already knew where he was. He's with Emily again. I felt angry inside. Why should I stay at home while she's out with her boyfriend? When I hung up the phone, my heart was pounding. Will. He wanted to see me, and I wanted to see him. Hours later, when the doorbell rang, I held my breath. Will was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a dark suit. Classic, but suited him perfectly. For a moment, our eyes locked. It was like we were both thinking the same thing. Then I recovered quickly and opened the door. "Come in." When Will stepped inside, a strange excitement filled me. I poured 2 glasses of wine in the kitchen, and we started talking about superficial things at first. But we both knew we couldn't escape that night without talking about it. Finally, when the silence grew heavy, Will took a deep breath and looked at me. "Susan, I couldn't forget that night." My eyes locked on him. I should have said it, but he had said it. I swallowed. What was I supposed to say? "Really?" I said, my voice shaking. Will cocked his head. It wasn't just a moment for me. The breath stopped inside me. As I stared at him, something I hadn't expected happened. "Susan, I've been in love with you for years." The world shook for a moment. What? Was he really saying that? I blinked my eyes. I choked on the words. Will's eyes were deep and sincere. "Susan, I've been in love with you for years." Those words echoed in my head. For years? For what? Will had always been Rick's brother to me, strong, successful, kind, but always family. I never realized he felt this way about me. A warmth spread through me. But this had to be a mistake, right? As I struggled with my inner voice, Will looked away as if regretting his words. "Susan, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that." For the first time, he was hesitant, a little worried. But I wondered, when the man I loved all these years was cheating on me, was the other man in love with me? For how long? How had it happened? I cleared my throat, my voice a little shaky. "You say, for years? How long?" Will took a sip of his wine, exhaled deeply. "I guess, since the first day I met you." A strange shiver ran through me. "But why didn't you ever tell me?" He didn't avert his eyes. She was determined. "Because you were Rick's wife." I let out a laugh, but it was a bitter laugh. I shook my head, turned the glass in my hand. "Funny, isn't it?" I said bitterly. "I thought of myself as Rick's wife for 30 years, but he'd already left me." Will looked at me. There was compassion and sadness and something else in his eyes. "Susan, you don't deserve this." For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone really saw me. But inside, I was a mess. What was I doing? Was it the booze? The late hour? Or was it because, for the first time, I felt truly desired? But deep inside me, deep down, I realized that I had always felt it. Later in the night, control was being lost. As the hours passed, the conversations deepened. I opened up for the first time. I told him how Rick had neglected me, how he didn't care, how he made me feel like it was all over by itself. And Will told me how he'd been repressing it all these years. And for the first time, I felt really wanted. I realized how Will was looking at me, the way he looked at me, like Rick hadn't looked at me in years. Our wine glasses were empty, the words slowed. Our breaths became audible as the silence stretched. He looked at me as I looked at him. "Susan," he said in a low voice. He had only said my name, but his eyes said more than words. I didn't think, I just felt. My own hand was reaching for Will's. I didn't stop Will from approaching me. Our faces were so close. I could feel his breath. And then, our lips met. At first it was light, but then it became more intense, more passionate. My hand slid to his chest. I felt his hands on my waist. I hadn't felt anything like that for a long time. And then I realized, for the first time, I really felt like a woman. Despite my advancing age, he was exploring my uncharted territory like an adventurer, and I was experiencing pleasures that Rick had never given me until this age. All the confusion inside me, all the logic, all the questions were silenced. I didn't want to think about tonight. I just wanted to feel. And in that moment, I gave myself to Will. What happens now? Was this night between Susan and Will a mistake, or the result of an inevitable passion? Waking up in the dim light of the morning sun with a man beside her. But he's not her husband. A storm was brewing inside Susan. Now, she had to face the truth. But which truth? Was this revenge or true love? Should Susan try to forget this night as a mistake? Or should she rewrite her life? What will Rick do if he finds out the truth? Will he throw Susan away and leave, or will he fight to keep her? Is Will really the right person for her, or is he just a reflection of her anger at Rick? Susan has suffered in silence for years, but what should she do now? Should she fall back on years of habit or forge her own path? What would you do? What is the right decision for Susan? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more of this story. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our new stories. Can sometimes the greatest betrayal lead us to the greatest love? We are waiting for your comments.